I'm going to call the Village of New Blair's Board meeting to order. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please have all cell phones silenced during the meeting. I'd look for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 5, consideration, discussion, potential appointment and swearing in of Tammy Newberry to the vacant village board seat expiring in April 2020.
I move for the appointment of Tammy to trustee.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
At this time, Lynn's going to swear Tammy in, please.
I'll go over by you so you can see this as well, okay? So if you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Tammy Newberry,
I, Tammy Newberry,
who has been appointed to the office of village trustee
who has been appointed to the office of village trustee
in and for the village of New Glarus
in and for the village of New Glarus
in Greene County,
in Greene County,
but has not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but has not yet entered on the duties thereof,
swears that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swears that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
I'll just sign right there.
Okay, item 6 is discussion, application Michael Bell to the village board seat expiring in April 2021. Greg just handed out Mike's letter of interest, thank you. Everybody had a chance to, I guess we're just discussing tonight. And probably at the next board meeting, if we all agree that we will appoint him at the next meeting.
How many weeks do we run our ad?
It's still going, isn't it?
It's still.
Well, it hasn't been in the paper, it's been posted on the website
Yeah.
and posted around town. I think we ran it one time.
And she ran an article as well once.
Yeah,
Was in there for a
couple of
month.
weeks. But
Almost
it's
a
still,
month.
it's still out there.
Sure. Yeah. And Mike Bell is here. Do you have any questions for him?
Any discussion? Chuck?
I just want to say for the record, I had asked for an agenda change tonight. Originally, Mike's, a vote on his appointment was on the agenda. I have no objections or anything to Mike being on the board, but since I was instrumental in pushing an ordinance that we give thought and time to appointing people to fill vacancies, I just felt it was rushing the agenda to, I haven't seen this until tonight, okay? I think we need to work on our procedure. But since all of us have been vetted through the electoral process, including Tammy at one time, I just think we need to act cautiously, let the public have their say, just as they did in our elections. So I had no objections, not that I know of, to Michael Bell's being on the board, but I think we need to act prudently in the best interests of the voters and taxpayers of New Glarus. So that's why I took that action.
In the way.
No, Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was glad to see that it got changed to the same process we had with Tammy. Having another meeting and having it be publicized, and we'll be ready.
Can I just, I'm curious as to what was the, he came to the village board for a discussion about the raising of the room tax. I guess I was not part of the board at that time, so I'm not sure what that was. So,
We had a member of the board who presented an agenda item where we would raise the room tax to 7% from 5 to 7%.
okay, I know what
And then we
that
had a discussion on it, and then we also had people from the community come and speak, and Michael came with a presentation with information and his, I wouldn't call it personal experience, but his strategies about why it would not be advantageous to the
okay.
hotel business.
So
businesses.
Michael, are you part of the, I can speak to Michael. Are you, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with you, we haven't met. Are you part of the hotel or?
Yes, I manage the Charlotte Longo Center.
Oh, okay. Much of my family will be staying with you guys. So,
They wanted the room tax, Tammy.
I know,
To
just in
support,
time.
to
Yeah.
put money towards the chalet, the Golden Fleece.
Oh,
was
okay.
It's a way
easy.
for the village
Okay.
to support that.
So,
Okay.
it,
At this point, it's still out there.
Yeah.
We haven't made it an agenda item at this point. We
Okay.
Kind of just let it go for now.
Okay, so it's I.
okay, it's just a discussion item. Any more discussion on?
Well, to be fair, I'm gonna ask Mike the same question I asked him. Do you have any access to grind with the village?
No, not at all. The biggest thing is that I find this is going to be a great learning experience for me. And one of the things that I want to try and do to the best of my ability is just be as nice as possible. So if we do end up bringing up the room tax agenda again, I'm more inclined to not vote on the issue because I am a conflict of interest within that agenda. However, I would love to speak prominently about why I don't think we should do it, but like I said, I will not vote on the issue.
And you're aware of committee meetings and extra meetings besides this one? Okay.
Okay,
So protocol would involve what? We
Right now, we just move on and we'll place it on the next agenda.
And then it will be publicized in our agenda notes that this, and then the community wants to respond in some way they can, correct? Okay.
Mhm.
okay. Anything else? Hearing none, we'll move on. Item 7, public appearances and citizens' comments. No debate will occur with the board on items introduced by citizens. Items will not be acted upon at this meeting, but will be referred to the proper staff or committee if action is required. And please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone like to speak?
Actually, I'd like to make a comment, and this is a good thing. You know, we have the road project. You guys know we have a road project? They're doing a good job. We had some problems with our water that got worked through, and for a small crew of guys, they're really working hard. And, you know, as dusty and as annoying as it can be at times, I don't have any complaints at all. So that's a note of, I guess, gratitude and good work.
I've been told they're about a week and a half ahead of schedule. I don't know if that changed this week or not. but you agree?
There's still it's about half a week to a week.
Yeah.
That's impressive
Still-
considering.
it is. So,
So you're not going to add a but?
Cool, that's nice.
No,
Wow. Not that you or anybody, but I'm waiting for somebody with. So I really don't think the others not, so I'm waiting for the but.
no, you know, they're working hard, you know, it's a big project, it is disruptive, of course. But, I mean, it's going, I think, as smoothly as it could be.
It'll probably be nice when it's done, right? Yeah, it's kind of a rough road.
I hope they're gonna raise the speed limit.
nice, and those sewer pipes are enormous.
Yeah.
But
It should
they
take
rain,
some
storm
storm
rain,
sewer down
storm
through
sewer
there,
stuff,
hopefully.
yeah,
You mean
Right.
the storm sewer pipes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
the sewer isn't
That's what
connected.
I,
Yeah. Okay, item 8, approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Item 9, discussion considerations, special event permit for Family Fest on 9/5/8/19.
I didn't really gather that they were doing anything new from what they've done the last couple of years. Did anybody else gather that they were doing anything different? No. It kind of sounded like very similar to what we've had.
Well, there was wasn't there, is this the one where they went back to they were gonna talk with the police chief about some?
Correct, but we've received no request for a change at this.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
It doesn't mean they won't come back, but no request at this
Okay,
time for any
this time.
changes to their
Okay.
permit.
So was there complaints about them at all in the last couple of years?
No,
Or any issues?
there was just a change in the.
I don't believe.
We did have one
Oh, we did?
question, not a
Oh.
complaint,
Oh,
and that was the use of the village hall, which was discussed.
We added some language.
They were here for a meeting, I think in January, thereabouts, and just sort of telling us they were making the same plans and so on. They last year had exclusive use of the village hall and had it locked. I had sort of complained that I came down here to get my agenda and I couldn't get in. Not a big deal, but in discussions with people since then, some people have said, well, these people that use the village hall, which apparently is their talent, people, the headliners, demand these things as celebrities. Putting all those things, air quotes on purpose. And I guess I wanted it to question whether it's a good idea to give someone exclusive use of the village hall. And they took that discussion and now I see they have said, well, the village hall will be open. And, so it's kind of a catch-22. We do rent out the
We
village
added
hall.
that language into the,
Ostensibly.
if you're looking at the draft of the special event permit, we added the language that said it needs to stay open to the public because it's a public building.
Okay,
So
so
if you want that,
so now my question is, we're gonna have 3,000 people across the street. We're gonna have a choice between porta potties and our bathrooms here. Is that a route we wanna go? Have we had any other festivals of that magnitude with the village hall open to the public?
I'm just
And I
thinking-
think that's something that, I don't know who the facilities come under, Public Works?
There was some discussion at one of the public works meetings. It wasn't an agenda item, but it was a discussion regarding the fact that they may have outgrown their festival site as a result of the size.
So we talked
I
about
think they
that
definitely
here.
have, but,
And we expressed concern
Mhm.
about that.
yeah, I think,
Is that,
if
do we
nothing
have to
else,
leave that open?
Vets Park would be a great place
No.
for it. but-
no, we can, I mean, we can change.
So we don't have to leave that open.
I wondered, actually too, it didn't occur to me until now, actually, that, wondered why their bands or whoever it is, their entertainment can't use their church. That's a
Exactly.
half block away for the same purpose.
half a
They
block
have
up
a
the street,
good-sized space.
and we probably should
There.
ask them that.
Why do we need to?
Maybe they have so much prep work or something going on, but we should ask them that.
Let's ask. I would.
We'll still have time to, at least as far
Approve
as,
it, yeah.
as far as this aspect of it goes.
Mhm.
But I think Public Works should think about the impact on this facility.
In the past, we've had no problems with anything regarding building or, in terms of anybody ruining anything or any issues with.
But it's generally not open.
It hasn't been open.
We don't have-
For events that are,
Okay.
for Elkhorn Man Triathlon, it will be, but there will also be staff here monitoring.
Plus a lot less people.
Yeah, a lot less people.
I mean, we're talking about an
Yeah.
Pretty substantial.
event of a really large magnitude for a town of this size, so,
And
and it's been brought up, I mean, and I agree that I think it's outgrown this central site.
And they didn't request to keep it open to the public, so we.
No, I think Lynn mentioned
Yeah.
that, but,
And it's Saturday, obviously it has to be because the library's open,
right.
but their
But
event
Sunday
is Sunday.
is, Sunday is the big
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, they requested use on Saturday.
Couldn't you do it, I'm renting that room this weekend, and my understanding is that it will be open on Saturday to the regular public, but then on Sunday, I have a key and my family will be coming in the back door, but,
Well, the issue came up, I think, more because they were actually had security around the building. and
Oh,
would not
and they
allow
weren't even
anyone
allowing.
in.
If he has a key, they
and
wouldn't
they
let
still
him in.
wouldn't let you, oh, okay.
That's
But
what
that,
the issue.
that's
Okay.
probably, a minor point compared to your family is nowhere near
Oh, no.
3,000 people.
No, well, thankfully, no, it's only 40 and that's enough, and I'm
Excuse me,
Right.
when you came down here, you had a problem entering the building because of their security?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed in, and I guess what disturbed me the most was it had never been discussed at the board level. I don't know how that came about. I don't know if Brian had just said, let's do this.
It was before Brian's time, I'm sure.
Well, and I think
No.
what happens is they fill out the form to
Brian
rent
was-
Village
Brian
Hall.
was the village administrator at that time,
But
last
this has
year.
been going on, he was only here 3 years.
I know, but this is the first time they
Oh,
ever,
it was.
this is the first time they ever asked for exclusive use
Oh,
for their talent.
So-
And I brought up the fact that
Yeah.
we have some highly placed talent here in the village of New Glarus and the Yoga Club and Minor Corps, and they've never asked for any, red jelly beans or black jelly beans removed type of thing. And I think some of it, that's what it boils down to.
So it was actually the performers, the band performers that were in here? And were there that many people in here?
I don't know,
Okay, because you never got in.
but it's a,
Well, I think
Maybe
the
we are.
solution would be leave it closed except for regular operation hours, and
Yeah.
if a person presents themselves that is an employee of the village and needs to conduct village business, then this part, they shouldn't be in this part anyway, right? I mean,
no.
No, they should.
so we should be, so like, if
But
a
if-
village board member or something needs to come in through the front door and go into the.
Yeah, but I don't think that's, to
Right.
me, that's not the point. I can come in another day. Now we're down to the point of, do we want,
You're afraid of a president, establishing a president?
yes, exactly. And so, by our own rules, I guess they would have the right to rent the room, just like
Right.
Tammy is doing back here, and I assume that, does that give access to the bathrooms?
Mhm.
Yeah, so,
But I mean, it will, And I don't plan on leaving the front door open on Sunday, because I don't want to be responsible
No, you
for who's
can't.
walking in and out
Because
from
you
the
are
public.
responsible.
Right, so I would,
Have they been
but
paying
but I mean,
for
certainly
use
if
of the
anybody that
community
came, had a key or
They have been
anything.
paying for use of the community room, and I think that's how it
Right.
happened. They rented the community room like Tammy or anybody else would rent the community room.
But they
Um,
secured the
You
whole.
cannot, yeah, and they couldn't open the doors in the front and leave them open unless they locked them open, because the lock doesn't work that way. So their key, they wouldn't be able to
Right.
like unlock the front doors and leave
Right.
them open.
Right,
We kind of had put that in to prevent what happened last time as the exclusive use. We can certainly take that off and say they shall have use of the community room located in Village Hall.
Well, I don't see
And
how,
they'll pay rent.
right, I don't see how we can stop them from using it under our own rules if they
Right.
pay rent.
Right.
So now I was more concerned about the language that I guess we put
Yeah.
in.
Well, we can take that out.
Nobody wants that many people coming
Yeah.
here.
So we
Yeah,
should
so it shouldn't.
just remove that. And then maybe just an understanding
And they fill
with
out the
them.
same
right,
responsibility forms that Tammy did.
Yeah.
right.
And then just a mention to them that,
They might.
obviously, the Village Hall, if someone, an employee wants to get in, that,
Well, someone besides me maybe, I don't know.
yeah.
They had, they had untrained security staff.
Was this last year this happened to you?
Yeah.
Part of the issue though, I think, if you come up and want to get in, you really have no identification saying you are a village trustee member.
I have a key to the door, that should suffice. I mean, I have no, in fact, I'm not even gonna be in town that weekend, but, yeah, I think the key to the door would probably say I have access to this building or any one of us.
I think it's just a conversation with them to say if you want to secure your bands, that's fine, but,
I'm still wondering, though, I would like them to answer the question, not why they don't use their own facility.
Good point. It's only a block and a half further.
No, it's half a
Half a
block.
block.
Half a
It's
block.
over here.
Oh, I was
Across
across
the
the
street.
Baptist church, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, it's Grace.
no, it's Grace.
Yes.
So does somebody want to make a motion on,
Do we
Is
have,
it necessary?
do we have a full,
it says discussion and consideration, so what do you want to do
so
with it?
do we have the full,
We have everything that
everything
we,
is
that's
staff
required.
approved?
Yep.
Yada, yada, yada.
Mhm. Emergency operations plan, insurance, yep, we got it all.
Well, then I'll move the grant the permit,
And you want me to remove that the building should remain open? You
with the
want me-
exception of, yes.
Okay.
I would second the motion.
You don't want to put anything in there about questioning them about using their building, like for next year?
We can
Oh,
just one call.
that can come in the form of a discussion.
Yeah, I think we need to discuss the whole, let's observe what happened, the size of this thing this year. And then I think we may need to discuss
A location.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Item 10, Finance and Personnel Committee. Item A, presentation of 2018 audit report. And you all have your audit report in front of you. Okay.
Okay, you should have two documents. One is the bound annual financial report. Second is a staple document titled Management Communications. So I'll
Wait a
go
minute,
through.
wait a minute.
It's stuck here.
That's stuck
Oh,
inside.
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to go through the annual financial report. Before I get started, just wanted to point out the name change. We joined forces with Clifton Larson Allen as of 1/1. So same people doing the audit, it's just a different name on the cover. So. Then if we turn to page 1, page 1 is the independent audit. So this is really our report to the village board. It indicates that the financial statements contained in this document are the financial statements of the village. These financial statements come directly from the financial records of the village. So we're using the same data that you're getting reports on a monthly basis to perform the audit. That data is really the responsibility of management. Our responsibility is to express opinions. So as a result of our audit, key paragraph is really the last paragraph on page 1. We indicate that in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. What that means is we would make no modifications to the report you have in front of you. The rest of the report, if you turn on pages 2 and 3, the only key part probably is the first paragraph on page 2. There was a change in a new accounting guidance. GASB statement number 75 was implemented as part of this audit. So that related to other post-employment benefits related to the life insurance program run through the state of Wisconsin and WRS system. The rest of the report really talks about that. There's other materials, including management's discussion and analysis and supplementally summary information from our prior year audit report, and kind of gives you a definition of when we expressed opinions on it. So it's more informative. Then if we turn to page 4 through page 10 is what we call management's discussion and analysis. Management's discussion and analysis is an opportunity for the village to kind of walk through some of the key things that happened in the current year, how they relate to the prior year, and it really is required to contain very specific requirements. The management's discussion and analysis of the village does comply. It gives you both charts of balances from last year to this year. It also gives you commentary on some of the significant changes in the current year. So if you had 10 minutes and you wanted to kind of get a good handle on what really happened in the current year, I'd encourage you to read these 10 pages. It kind of walks you through some of the trends, some of the things that kind of try to simplify the report you have in front of you. Then if we turn to page 11, 12, and 13 are what we call your government-wide financial statements. And what that means is it's not how you adopt an annual budget, but it presents the village as if you were an enterprise operation. So all assets of the village are captured, all liabilities are captured, including general long-term debt, and your net position or net ownership is disclosed. So if you look at this, total assets remain fairly constant, about 35.6 million. A lot of those assets are the building we're in or the road infrastructure that gets citizens around the village. Those aren't really assets you can sell, but they're assets that are essential in providing of services to the village residents. The second part, I just want to point out total assets, net pension asset. You're actually reporting a net pension asset. It's 3 lines above the total assets, about 225,000. So last year you reported about a $62,000 liability. Now I just want to point out that this is related to 2017, so there's a year lag in that, primarily because the Wisconsin Retirement is yet to provide any data for 2018. So if we waited until 2018, we'd be here in November. So there's always a year lag, but really what that represents is the Wisconsin Retirement is a very well-funded plan that you're providing to your employees. It's an asset because if you remember anything in 2017, the investment returns were very strong in 2017, so any type of pension system relies on investments, and when you have strong investments, you're probably going to have a different or a change in the value. So as of 2018, with some of the returns in 18, we might be back to a liability. But it's really oscillating really right on fully funded, and it's one of the best plans for any statewide system in the United States. So just wanted to point that out. Liabilities is really what you owe to others. You can see your liabilities decreased about almost $1 million. That decrease is primarily in your long-term obligations. So as you pay down long-term debt using taxes and various other financing sources, your total liabilities will decrease. So that's the primary reason for your liability decrease. Then your net position, you show about a $800,000 increase. So it really shows that you use resources to retire debt and therefore own more of your assets at the end of this year. Then we turn to page 12 and 13, where the last page just represented a snapshot. This represented a period of time. As you can see in the total change in net position, which is kind of the bottom half of the column, you can see about $871,000. So that kind of equates to what we saw on the front page, of which about $562,000, $63,000 related to governmental activities. Governmental activities is really your general fund, your special revenue funds, your TIP districts. Business type activities is really your water utility, your sewer utility, your enterprise type operations. That also increased about $308,000, almost $309,000. If you remember in the opinion, I did talk about a change in accounting principles. That had a negative impact on prior year balances of about $47,000. So not a significant balance, but certainly a liability going forward. So any questions on that? Certainly as the net position grows, it's an indication that you're not only replacing your equipment and replacing your infrastructure, but also owning more of it on your side of the equation. So. Then we turn to page 14. Page 14 now gets us into the fund financials. And so this is how the village adopts an annual budget. So when we're looking at the general fund, primary difference from these statements to the fund statements is you no longer see any type of capital assets. You no longer see any type of long-term obligation. So in these financial statements, you're really measuring current resources, short-term resources, and not really long-term. So what that means is if you take out debt, it increases your cash, it increases your fund balance. As you spend down debt for capital, it decreases your fund balance. So it's just a change in basis of how this is recorded. But you can see there's two what we call major funds in the village. It's the debt service and the general fund. The general fund itself is major by the fact that it is your operating fund. Debt service is major by the fact of your debt service and how much you're levying for debt service going forward.
Is debt service interest?
Principal and interest on the long-term obligation. So if we turn to page 16, you can see on page 16, your general fund increased to about $134,000. That tells you had a very good budget year. Here, if you look at your debt service, you can see you spend about $385,000 of principal and about $121,000 of interest. So it's both principal and interest. Typically, your debt service will be kind of what you levy because what you really spend in it. Now, this doesn't include any of the debt service related to TIF districts. Those are funded in the other governmental funds. That's why you have principal in that column. That's really debt related to the TIF districts and the project plans that you have currently ongoing.
Okay.
So overall, when you're looking at your general fund, typically you might see your other governmental or capital projects go up and down with bond proceeds. What you're really trending is how's my general fund doing? Clearly a strong budget year as we indicated. Then if we turn to page 18, 19, and 20, really is your budgetary comparison. So I'd like to kind of spend a couple seconds on this because this is important from a standpoint of strong budget. A strong general fund is a strong financial ability to handle things that come up on an entity level. So you can see taxes, you would expect the budget to actual to be very close because what you levy is kind of what you anticipate from a budget perspective. So nothing unusual there. As you kind of go down, like most governments, revenues don't really fluctuate from year to year. You kind of know what you're gonna get from a charge. Some years you might have a big building project that raises, some years it goes down, so you can, that's the one that has some typical fluctuations, but typically your revenue flow is fairly consistent. The challenge most governments have is not levy limits, it's the fact that other revenues besides property taxes don't often move at the same time, inflation. So balancing your budget is always a strong. So one of the questions I often get is, when I look at the fund balance, you're telling us I'm in good shape. Why is the budget so difficult to prepare sometimes? It's really because you're really balancing current budget inflows and outflows and not your financial position going forward. You want to maintain a strong financial position going forward. So that's why budgets are often more difficult to complete. And if you look at the expenses, overall, what you're looking at is your expenses and your budget variances and your expenses, is one of, that coupled with the revenue really is what drove the $134,000 net increase in fund balance. So each of the accounts has different variances. So overall, your expenses, you were about 118,000 under, about 37,000 under your approved budget, with the 80,000 of revenues. Now, one of the key things on the revenue side I should point out is, like most communities, interest, obviously the interest rates moved up a little bit in 18, so most communities had a surplus in that budget line. You can see last year on page 18, last year your interest was 23, this year it's 43, so it's one of those line items that what's the budget. Then if we turn to 21 and 22 and going forward, now we're looking at your business type activity. So you really have four what we call functions within your business site. Water and light are all embedded in one fund. And then you have a wastewater and a stormwater utility. And we do have additional documentation or discussion in our management communications. And we'll go through that then. And then the rest of the report is really notes and additional details and support for the financial statement. So a lot of good information in there, but you just step back from a governmental fund balances perspective, a very strong year going forward. Any questions on the annual financial report? Okay. So if we go into the staple document, the staple document is really, we call it management communications. So it's really our communications not only to the board, but also to the management of the village, in which we lay out certain things. And so the first 4 pages or so are really some standard communications that we are required to communicate to the board. Primarily talking about our responsibilities, talking about the fact that government auditing standards does require us to review your internal controls and compliance, because any government, obviously you're safeguarding the public assets that you're managing. So it's important that a government has internal controls over those assets and also does comply with all the laws and regulations like debt limits, levy limits, etc. that you're required to communicate. So our audit not only is a financial audit that we talked about, but also looks at internal controls and compliance. If we turn to page 2, we do have 2 items that we consider significant deficiencies within the village's internal control structure. These are the same as we've always reported. They primarily deal with the size of the village. So we all, oftentimes we go, why do we bring it up? And it's really because your role as the village board is to review and at committee levels to review some of the financial information, ask questions, because of the size of the village staff, you're not perfect in the segregation. So it's more of an opportunity to say, as you go through your process and go through checks and approve checks, etc., we as your auditors rely on that second review is what we call somewhat of a compensating control over the segregation. The second one is really the fact that we prepare the financial report. We audit well over, in Wisconsin, well over 600 clients, the majority of them were preparing the financial report just because of the document size and our familiarity with reporting requirements. It makes it a lot easier for us to do the reporting. So it isn't a negative on the staff here at the village. It's just saying, and you could probably blame Enron because everyone said the auditors or the auditors report, they're really your report, and that's why we're saying that. So.
Can you just step back one thing?
Sure.
Is there anything, when you suggested that we don't have a good segregation of duty, so you're saying that the size of our staff, they have 3 people that are in the office on a regular basis?
Plus you got the utilities. But
Oh, the utility, right. So what your concern is with the lack of segregation of duties is that there should be, like the board should have, how do you know that
Well,
they're not asking questions or not?
I guess what I'm saying is I'm relaying that the fact that we're relying on board oversight,
Okay.
and that's why we're presenting it, is because the board has a role in internal control over any organization.
Okay,
And not that you're not doing it, it's
Okay.
just that, I'm kind of reiterating the importance of doing it, is I
Okay.
guess what I was doing. So,
okay.
How
That's
much
fine.
different are we from the bulk of the
not very
municipalities?
much different. It's just, it's difficult because you have segregated the best. We don't call it a material weakness, which is a higher definition.
Okay,
Material weakness, if you have one person doing almost everything,
right.
you have segregated. It's just, you'll never get perfect segregation.
Municipality best practices versus
Yep.
resources, right?
Right, exactly.
I can tell you that in some prairie with a very robust staff, in the audit, they still get knocked for segregation.
Okay.
It's gonna be worse now with you.
Well, I've heard that term before, so I was just concerned as to if there was a concern that maybe the board hadn't. So
No.
that's not it, it's just, this is the way it is.
Yep.
Comes up every year.
Yep.
Right.
It's more of an emphasis point of why I said it. The
Right,
board members is
right,
to
to keep
realize
us
that.
vigilant that we should be
Yep. Exactly.
Reading news reports.
asking questions and reading.
So the rest of the report goes through, there's a couple things on estimates. Certainly, anytime your report contains actuarial analysis from the Wisconsin retirement system, that's a big estimate, obviously. The actuaries are projecting depreciation on the infrastructure, how long this building's gonna last, how long the road lasts. Those are all estimates, but we believe the village's estimates are reasonable, neutral, and consistent. Then the rest really says that we didn't have any uncorrected. We had a couple adjustments, but we did post those. We did not have any uncorrected misstatements, no disagreements. The audit itself went very well from our perspective. Staff here at the village, including utility operations, was prepared as we walked in. So we had no concerns. The audit went well. It's just kind of a discussion. So had we had any concerns, we would identify them in the rest of that report. So audit went, like I said, audit went well for us. Then if we turn to page 5, here you see really a comparison of last year to this year. So when we're looking at our audit report, we had 1 year, and then we had a summary total. When we were reporting here, we're giving you really 2 years of comparison. So if you kind of go through, nothing unusual, nothing significant occurred in the current year. If I look at the changes, there's nothing that jumps out of me and says, oh, there's a challenge here or a problem here. Obviously, TIF districts can go up and down. TIF district number 4 is in a deficit, but very small in relation. Many of our clients have, as you do an increment district, especially a newer one, it typically ends up in the deficit until you start generating a bigger tax levy going forward. So,
What are these two, by the way? 3 and 4, which districts are those?
3 is the brewery, and
Okay.
4 is, an area of Backtown, and we've added
Okay.
some downtown. We did, the last time we amended these districts, we amended it so that TID 3 can be a donor TID. So we could use money from TID 3 to cover the balance, the deficit balance in 4.
then really on the bottom of page 5 talks about your minimum fund balance. You have set aside about $350,000. When you look in relationship to your general fund, certainly you're not close to your minimum. Your minimum is really designed to say, what's our bare minimum to maintain a working cash flow? Certainly from that perspective, the growth in the current year obviously helped to continue that trend that we saw in the last couple of years. It's really necessary, as things happen going forward, to have a strong general fund from that perspective. But then, if we look, the next paragraph really talks about your 2 tax increment districts. District number 4 has an unreimbursed project cost of $300,000. District 3 has about $954,000. So you might say, well, how come they didn't have a deficit? That's because they also have bonding that's associated with them. If you remember on the audit when I said the districts pay for their own debt, not the general government. So what you notice when we're looking at the governmental funds, we're really focusing on fund balance. That's kind of a sense of your liquidity. It's a sense of your strength of operation. Now, when we switch to our enterprise funds, we're really looking at a trend in what's our operating revenues and expenses. The main reason is because your utility operations are dependent on charges for services, and making sure the charges for services cover the operating costs going forward. So the first one we're looking at here is your sewer or wastewater utility, which is non-regulated. What that means is you, as a village board, have the power to set the rates. You do not have to get Public Service Commission or any other outside authority to raise the rates in your wastewater utility. You can see, if we look at the operations, pretty consistent operating income, a little bit down going forward. But overall, you're changing that position and stayed about 70,000. Now, how that equates to cash flow really drives on the bottom of page 6. So even though we had a strong, operating income, cash generated from operations was about 480,000 compared to 500. A lot of that cash really is used to pay principal and interest on long-term debt. So here you can see that in the current year, because you use some of the cash for operating, you spend about 36,000. It left you only a change in cash and cash equivalents of about 15,000 in the current year, compared to about 64,000 in the prior year. So it's just you were able to cover your debt service in the current. You have about 1.5 million in cash at the end of the year, but certainly would look to watch the change here on the cash, especially. I know there's some projects out there on the sewer side with the plant. That obviously a sewer plant and sewer operations are highly capital intensive operations. So managing your wastewater rates to kind of mitigate any impact of future projects is a proactive thing to look at it as an organization.
Can I just ask quickly, why were the charges for services down in the operating revenues? The total operating revenues were down and the charges for services were down. I would think we would have had increased usage, so does this have something to do with the brewery or?
I'd have to check with Beth to make sure. It could also have to do with LSI and the surcharges to LSI if they're not, if their BOD and their suspended solids are way high, then they get a hefty surcharge on that. And if they're keeping them in check, they might not be getting as much of a surcharge.
Right.
But wouldn't that come under expenses?
No, the surcharge is what you charge them. And typically, so you add it on to their fees, and if that, oftentimes what happens.
Oh, okay, I see.
Is operating costs come down because the reason you surcharge, you use a lot more chemicals in the treatment of it, so.
Because if you do look, the
Increased
operating
use.
expenses were down too, so then the charges would be lower because the operating expenses were down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look proportional exactly, but you can see that we had expenses of 401, and then.
Typically,
But still, the revenues were down, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
typically, I just want to, revenues and expenses don't always go equal.
Yes.
On electric, they do,
Right, right,
because you're buying your power.
right.
So if you consume less electricity, your customers, you're going to buy less.
Buy less, right.
Wastewater or water doesn't always have the same relationship,
Okay.
which
But there
is.
is a little bit of a relationship,
Correct.
it's not just.
Well, this was probably a relationship because of reduced chemical costs.
Reduced
With-
chemical costs.
Yeah, which is,
and this
because
big
that's
expense
right. A lot of your
versus the-
costs are fixed in the electric utility,
Okay.
guys, electricity, but
Okay.
chemicals really is a change, or, I'm not, offhand, I don't exactly remember, but I would think it was chemicals that would have reduction.
Well, the only chemical that we use out of that treatment plant is chemicals to, pardon me, thicken sludge. We do not use any chemicals in purification of the water.
So, yeah, I don't remember exactly what was down. Trying to-
But that's a good question.
But that's an expense, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You're looking at why is the revenue down?
Yeah.
And then one suggestion was is that the service usage was down, and now they're saying that that's not necessarily a correlation, so it's.
Well, we'll leave that.
Yeah, and some of it also has to do with the fact that your water rates were increased. There's always a rate aversion. When people hear a water rate increase, they use less water for a period of time, and your sewers.
What world do you live in?
What's that?
Joking.
No. So there's a correlate, a little bit there too,
No,
so.
I understand.
That's a pretty big drop, I mean, yeah.
Well, it's, let's hope that's part of it, you know?
Right.
Because that's what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Right.
Yeah, all right.
Right.
If we turn to page 7, now we're looking at your stormwater. Once again, that is a non-regulated utility, which means the village board sets the rates. Much smaller, if you remember when we were looking at the financial statements, we call this a non-major fund just because of the size of the fund. But if you look at it, pretty consistent operations, and changing that position is a positive $9,200 this year. Then if we look at the next one is really your light utility. So here, the light and the water are really embedded in one fund, but we're separating them because both are regulated. Both have separate reporting to the PSC. When we look at, your operations here, you can see operating revenues are down a little bit. Operating expenses are also down a little bit. So primarily, the major reason for that is power cost came down in 2018, related to a number of factors, but when you are buying power, that cost of each unit that you're buying was lower in 2018. So your PCAC and the pass-through of that reduction of cost really did drop your operating revenues. If you look at the bottom, you can see overall the impact. You can see that from a PSC perspective, your operating income was about 80,000 compared to about 148,000 in the current year. So if we switch to page 8, you can see a rate of return is about 4.22%. Compared to about 7.87. So 7.87 is a very strong rate of return. 4.22 is a little on the lower side, not terribly off the authorized rate, but something to be aware of, especially I know there's some substations and projects out there. As you structure your rates, clearly you're going to have to take a look at your electric as you do additional capital costs in the future. And then if we look at the water utility, once again, a regulated industry, or regulated utility, here you see the impact on the water rate increase that was approved by the Public Service Commission. You can see on the bottom, we did have a stronger rate of return at about 4.3% compared to about 2%. So certainly very close to the authorized rate. You'll have an option in a year or to look at a simplified, as we talked when we did the rate increase. We want to make sure we're managing and potentially doing simplified so we don't have a large increase at a point in time in the future.
Can I ask what the property tax equivalent is on all of these? So that's where our taxes are contributing income to these also, is that what that?
No, that, they actually contribute to the general fund of the village. So to make them online with a private enterprise utility, they pay we call it a pilot payment, a payment in lieu of taxes to the village.
Okay,
So that becomes part of your general fund of the revenue.
got it, okay.
And then we had one, one comment related to a new standard on leases. So this is just an informational comment. We don't anticipate this having a significant impact on the village, but certainly, our role is really to advise you on the new standards that are coming out there, and take a look at them. So with that, I'll entertain any questions anyone will have either on the management communications or the annual financial report. Like I said, certainly appreciate the efforts here of the staff here at the village.
If you could, I just want to clarify with the board, if you all remember for the Third Avenue bonding project, when Ellers was doing that, they had informed the board of why they weren't using wastewater revenue bonds in order to cover the cost of that, in order to stay using general obligation. That has, as he mentioned, something to do with the cash position of the wastewater utility, and that Ellers wasn't confident that it was generating enough revenue in order to cover the cost of bonding for it. And so in the near future, we're going to have to move forward with a rate study in order to strengthen the position of that utility. And really, we'll start looking at rate studies for all of the utilities, water, electric, to ensure that they're remaining in a strong position and getting the rate of return that allows them to continue operating at the level that we expect.
Do you know, I said nothing to this, but just since you brought it up, what's the average time, from the time you do a rate study until you get a new rate approved? Is there
I could answer that. I mean, it's on the sewer and the storm that you manage, it's as soon as you approve.
But
On the PSC, it's probably a 6-month process.
I would have thought longer.
It depends. I mean, I've got one that we filed that we're going back and forth on the PSC, and we filed it in December, it's still on new rates.
Is that because of objections or?
It was impact fees, and they didn't like what the village was doing on the impact fees, so, yeah, they came back and forth. But typically what you're finding on rate cases is there's a lot of new staff at the PSC, so we're focusing on smaller items instead of big picture, where's the utility going? And we always, as a consultant, we're always trying to get it back into focusing on the future, not the past. Because if you set rates based on what happened in the past, you're coming back again.
Yeah.
It's almost like they got an inverse relationship that they want people to keep coming back to them. And so as a consultant, we're always pushing them to say, let's look forward, because we never set a budget based on what happened in the past. We can look at what we're going to spend in the future. And but that's where some of the struggle has been, is they like to look and say they want to average four-year historical summary of what you spent the last 4 years. Well, what you spent 4 years ago might not be what you're spending next year. And it kind of lowers it. So I think we're finding them taking longer because consultants are kind of pushing them a little bit to say they don't want to keep coming in front of you.
So shouldn't there, when you're looking at, so what you're saying, the reason they're asking for the past 4 years is that you should be budgeting all along for the idea that this is a depreciating asset? Are they kind of saying that, you kept your rate at this and now all of a sudden you have this $400,000? I mean, like if you were never thinking you were ever gonna need to buy a new car, and you were never putting any money away for a new car, and now all of a sudden this year you want a new car, and you go from nothing to a $60,000. Is that what they're kind of frustrated with, is that
no,
they should have been putting?
Not really. I mean, where we're struggling sometimes is they look at 4 years of the last 4 years of salary. Well, that's not what the current year salary is gonna be. I mean, we're giving raises, so why are we gonna look at 4 years ago and we got 4 years of raises built upon that?
Right.
So capital is really handled differently than operation.
Okay,
So capital is really looking at your depreciation expense of what you're capturing in rate of return.
So, budgeting for future capital improvements doesn't really.
It does not affect the operating side. What it impacts the operating side, I mean, you can on some of your non-regulated, what they're looking at is they're giving you a rate of return and a depreciation to replace your equipment. The challenge a lot of utilities are having is, you know, if you're, depending on where you are in the life cycle, you know, oftentimes the developer will give you those assets up front, you know, contribute them to the utility.
okay.
But, so you never recover until the utility has to replace it. So the challenge, they struggle with the fact of, yeah, someone may give me the water main in front of my property. I might not have to replace it next year, but at some point I might have to replace it. And if I've never built up any money to replace it, then I always have to bond for it.
Right,
Yeah,
and they can't, and then they can't get the bond because they don't have a high enough rate of return, is that what?
Well, the sewer utility is a little bit unique because, I mean, you got a pretty high debt service and, you know, and so what happens with revenue bonds, there has to be a coverage ratio. So your P&I plus a percentage, you're not covering or you're very close. We've always, on your sewer utility with clean water fund, we've always struggled with the coverage ratio, so that's probably why they didn't want to do revenue bonds on it, because you're already struggling with the coverage ratio on the clean water funds.
Okay.
Add more revenue bonds, and typically they have 1.2%, so you need 1.2% of P&I to cover. And that's a little hard sometimes. So. Any other questions? Good questions.
Dave, can we touch a little bit on, we're talking about electric rate cases, and so the substation project is out there. We have to prove the expense, I mean, we have to expend the money before we can do a PSC rate case for that. I know that they're working on looking at a rate case for the electric, and one of the things that we've done historically is combine the light and the water together in cash. We talked a little bit about separating those so that it's easier for them to build the electric rate case in the future. I think you had mentioned that that was something you could do for us. And I'm guessing there's a cost for you to do that?
Not as significant, because it's really based on the last couple of years. So there's certain costs that you allocate that you actually know on the balance sheet. So we know what our receivables are for water and electric. We know what our capital assets are. We know what a lot of those are. The challenge, you know, so it isn't, the only time it gets a little more complex is if you don't end up with a number you like when you do the allocation. So you got to take a look at last couple of years to say, how do I allocate cash? Because right now we don't, the challenge when you have a combined electric and water, for the longest time, water was probably using cash of the electric utility from a generation, because you always had a strong electric utility rate of return. Water was a little lower, so you didn't really know that water was kind of probably not generating positive cash, and we were really relying on the electric utility. That's why it's nice to separate, because then you could see, is my water really a positive cash flow? So the more complicated is take a look at, okay, we could identify, here's the things we know, and then we have to historically say, here's what we think cash should be. And we all have to agree that that looks reasonable from an allocation perspective.
But essentially, you already have the data you need to.
We have the data, correct, to start it. It's really taken the last couple of years off the PSC report and saying, here's what we know.
Let
And
me
here's where it is.
get this straight, if we have we're looking at a new substation, and obviously it's going to be very expensive, can we go ahead prior, is that what you're saying? Apply for that rate case?
No.
You can probably explain that.
Yeah.
It has to be used and useful, is the term the PSC uses. So
Say it has to be
used
what?
and useful,
Used and
so it has
useful.
to be built in the ground, turned on, before we can start recouping the costs. So you can't preemptively apply for an increase in the rate for a project you have not yet completed.
So
Well,
what does that do for your ability to
you-
borrow?
And I want to, you could do a step increase, which means that as soon as it's operational, then you kick it in, and everything else is done already. So if you have a big project, you don't want to file after it's operational because of the 6-month time frame. So we do a step increase, we can say, here's the operational cost. The second that, because they don't want you to get a return on it until you actually fire it up and are using it in the operation. The second you fire it up, then step 2 of the increase goes into effect. And it just minimizes the time between the time you're starting to pay the debt service and the time that the PSC would authorize you.
But doesn't that impact the way you borrow then? Because if you get a rate case after you've borrowed, that's either going to change your ability to pay it quickly. Doesn't that impact?
We talked about like construction loans, so we would borrow, small borrowings for the, and then once it's complete, you roll it all into one.
But you would have projected that into your,
Yeah.
You typically have a pretty good handle what your cost is going to be. They're not perfect, but because there's always contingencies in any project, but you typically would, see, what you typically do is, you know, if you're going to go with revenue bonds, you have to project, okay, what our revenue bond, well, we get coverage on that. And that's where, you know, you project, okay, here's what we need from a coverage perspective. And that's how you do your rate case to PSC, saying, here's our coverage requirements. And then that's the step. As soon as it becomes operational, they kick in, you notify them that it's operational. And then step 2 of the rate case kicks in. So, so you typically look, do you need to do 2-step or do you just do 1? The size of the substation cost probably means, hey, you want to be on the proactive side to get that all ready to go. So you're not waiting 6 months after you're starting to pay debt service on it.
do you have a date certain deadline on that? No.
So let me ask you, if you have your operational, you're going, you're running, and you apply for a rate case, and you get it, and you find that your rate of return is not sufficient, I guess that, you know, you have to prognosticate what it's going to be. How long of a span can it be before you apply for another rate case, in case you need it?
Full blown could go, you know, I mean, I don't think there's any time frame if you really
There
get,
is.
but
Okay.
I mean, the reality is I wouldn't expect to go through the process and not have rates that are sufficient for a period of time. So,
Okay.
I mean, the whole process really sets the rates so that you're because we know almost everything. You know, the only thing, you know, an engineer would project operational costs, if that would have a huge impact, you know, would a new substation cost more to operate? Probably wouldn't cost a ton more, it's more on the capital side of that operation. But from a standpoint, I would think it'd be a highly unusual that you go through the process and not have adequate rate of return, because everything would be included in there, unless we had huge cost overruns that we did not anticipate.
One of the few times it's maybe nice to have a stable population rather than the growth we all like. Speaking for myself, of course.
So I think if we can move forward with the separation of those two, that would be
Okay.
helpful going forward for sure.
Definitely.
It seems to make sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
It's
then would
just
there
been
be different
this
billing then? I mean, because we're,
they are different, I mean, it's
They're-
all on one,
they're
but
itemized.
they're separated out anyway.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter.
yeah, so it's just a matter of completing that step and then
Right.
we're good.
I mean, the only allocation is your equity and your cash is really the only thing. And you gotta kind of, does it pass the smell test, meaning does it meet?
Right, okay.
Because, you know, both equity and cash are historical, they build over time. And you can't identify versus the plant, we know we're tracking every piece of water main versus sewer versus
Right.
electric.
Right.
You're not tracking cash as water cash because you have a combined that. So that's
Okay.
primarily the biggest challenge you'll have.
One last quick, if you could, we have a few new trustees on board now, and if we could just, as budget time's coming, you review we have a lot of sinking funds we have that are set aside, designated for specific purposes. We have some surplus. And as we go forward with the budget, recommendations for use, not use of that, continuing to save for things, there's a street sinking, there's an equipment sinking, there's a squad sinking, fire truck, all those kinds of things. Can you just touch on how that works with budgeting?
Sure. I mean, obviously, any type of designation is really controlled by the village, so you get board. So you could change any designation at any point in time. What you're trying to do is stabilize your tax rate and manage your growth of funds for project costs that, can fluctuate. So the reserves are really designed to try to create some structure within the finances of the village. When we looked at your general fund certainly is in a strong position compared to the minimum. Now, minimum is minimum. I don't ever want to get down to minimums, but those are available for one-time projects. I mean, typically what we always recommend is fund balance not be used for any type of operational, not pay for an officer, not pay for an operational cost, only because that works one year, it might work the next year because you might have some fund balance. At some point in time, fund balance goes and then you're stuck with an operational cost.
Right.
And then what are you going to cut?
Right.
So it's really driving off of how do you manage long term. So your fund balances and your policies are really designed to stabilize your tax rate and manage the village in a proactive way. It doesn't mean that you can't reallocate between different things if you have an emergency or if you have something that changes in focus. And certainly you're in a strong position. I mean, your TIF districts are strong. You're not, I got some communities where TIF districts are really kind of eating at the general fund cash because they're covering the cash from a general fund perspective. You really don't have that. So from a standpoint, any of your reserves are really designed to maintain a strong financial position going forward, but can be adjusted by the village action of the village board. So that's why they're assigned by the village.
So like for example might be, from what I understood, if we are putting aside money every year for a new fire truck and some generous donor comes along and gives us a $300,000 fire truck and we had $200,000 sitting there, we probably aren't going to need it for a fire truck anymore. But we have another thing we could, but at any other time to make that decision, knowing that that $300,000 truck is going to have to be bought, it would be foolish to move that over. But if one gets donated, we might look at.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is
Is that kind of the
some
idea?
communities have said, we're maintaining a reserve, we could always bond for it. Bonding allows us to raise our tax levy because levy dollars are available to increase your tax levy versus operational. Sometimes, you're in a very nice position because you've really strongly managed your fund balance policies and fund balances. I got other communities that don't have the wherewithal to put away money for non-lapses, so they end up borrowing all the time. And that just, it's not necessarily, it's a side effect of the levy limit, and it's not a good side effect that we convert more to borrowing. So it's really about balancing, and it's all your policies are really designed to balance your financial strength going forward. And I think, like I said, the village has done a very good job of managing that. Doesn't mean you can't tweak any of those percentages a little bit. Or if you had a project that came up and you didn't want a bond to take, some money out of the general fund, I'd be okay with that. You just got to manage that long term so you don't take too much. That makes sense? I answered that.
Thank you.
Okay.
You did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, item 11, administrator's report. Update on DOT response to West Side Library site requests.
If you took a look at the notes, I did reach out to the DOT, had a phone call with the regional coordinator out there. They indicated that they did not foresee reducing the speed limit in that area as it's currently 35 miles per hour and that they it wouldn't, that just the development of a public library out there would not encourage them to decrease the speed limit any further on that state road. And they also did indicate that they do permit pedestrian crossing infrastructure to be installed. It would be at the expense of the village. They will only permit it if it is fully ADA compliant, meaning that there are sidewalks at both sides of the crossing, so that if someone is, they are crossing to something. They are not crossing from a sidewalk to a street or from a street to a sidewalk. It has to, the infrastructure has to be present to obtain a permit for that infrastructure.
And we currently do not have that, right?
No.
So is it, so I was trying to picture that because I know the sidewalk runs up the south side, all the way up to that corner. But then what they're saying is in order to put a crossing walk across to, for the lack of a better, it's Nicholas's house on the corner there, there would have to be a sidewalk there to make that safe?
You'd have to, right, so if you crossed, if the sidewalk where it stops stayed where it is, and they crossed the road there, there would have to be,
Either way,
Would
it's
there
too
not
cross.
only need to be though a sidewalk on the south side leading to the library, right?
Okay, so you would
Yeah.
extend that
South side.
sidewalk up,
I mean, the north side. The north side of Highway 39. It went from sidewalk on the south side to sidewalk on the north side that went to the library. What does Durst Road have to do with
well, there's not sidewalks anywhere out there.
it? No, right, but there wouldn't need to be one
So this
down
is the
Durst
Swiss
Road
Center.
for
I
this
know what you're
crosswalk.
saying.
There'd have to be some, there'd have to be a landing at the Durst Road intersection.
right.
So
I get
there would
it.
have to
I know what you're
be
saying.
some form
Okay.
of sidewalk there for them,
Library.
for a refuge for someone who was crossing before they would then turn and cross Durst
And then
Road.
this is Durst
Yeah.
I don't think
here,
they're,
right?
I don't think they're saying
And this is
Durst Road
Nicholas's.
has, they're just saying
This is Highway
Durst Road
39.
and
And there's currently a
the north
sidewalk
side
Just need to be
that
some-
goes to right
So
here.
that's the
some
landing
men.
Right.
space.
So that sidewalk ends right here, right?
Yeah.
At 39 and Durst on the south side of the road.
Correct.
So we would either have to extend that sidewalk up here and then place a sidewalk here that crossing could meet.
That-
Or you would have to put at least some sidewalk there and then across there. So additional sidewalk would need
And
to
it would all be
be.
determined upon where the entrance to the library is as well.
Right, and so that's what we would have to look at, because there's like a cemetery like here, right? Where is that hill? Is it coming like right in here?
It's coming down into the, when you're coming into the
Right.
village.
Because, you know, whether or not you would try to design the sidewalk to cross here to give people that much more time, or move the sidewalk up here.
Down at the corner, yeah, and then run the sidewalk to the
So-
library.
So you would cross over at Neelis's house, and then cross over to the Swiss Center, and then walk up to the library right here, is what you would see.
Oh, I thought it would come.
This would be Durst.
Over,
It's-
across.
I think it's something we have to have the engineers look at, Strand or
Then
something.
you
Yeah.
still have to
Figure out
cross,
what-
If you
yeah.
want
where
to, if you
the-
want to do a design
Yeah.
of it.
I think you
There's a
you have to
cost
just
associated.
figure out the rest of the rest of the sidewalk. We only have sidewalk
Yes.
infrastructure up
Sidewalk
here.
piece
This is-
could be done.
So would that be mostly piecemeal, or we talked about extending it out on the south side, I can't remember the name of the streets, south side going past Neelis's, the north side of Neelis's, coming outside of the village, coming from the village out there?
Well, you're talking about coming up this way
Yeah.
instead of this way?
Yeah,
You're talking about
and then you have the
people
two,
I see what you're saying.
There's no sidewalk on
no,
that
there isn't.
either.
Yeah, Lynn is out there.
Roger,
Hi.
you have to recognize, if you want Linda to speak.
I just saw her hand up about 6 seconds ago. Linda?
Just to help you out with this discussion, a sidewalk is already in the preliminary concept design to go from the corner of Durst on the north side in front of the Swiss Center to the library. So I think what would just have to happen is, in fact, we talked about, we could do a diagonal cross from where the sidewalk ends diagonal across the road to where the sidewalk begins at the corner of Swiss Center.
I'd have to check with the DOT.
I don't know if you can
If
do
they
it.
would do that,
I'm
or
not-
we have to do a little envelope.
I don't believe it's,
They let us do it.
I don't believe a diagonal cross would be ADA compliant.
I don't think that's a really good idea.
We just have
But I
to
think we
extend
need-
that.
But the sidewalk is part of the concept design already, so,
Your portion of
Yeah.
the, yeah.
To the
The north
Swiss
side.
so
Center.
you don't keep going, well, we should do the engineering and we should do that, because it's
And
part of the design already on that part. If you need to do like a lip landing, either going across from Neelis's, or I don't know who lives on the other corner.
Right, I think you probably just need to do like build a sidewalk like this, right here is just a corner, all they
But I
have to do
think-
is corner.
It all's gonna depend on DOT.
I think we're sitting here without any
And
maps or
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
to
we
visualize
can.
any of this.
Right.
And we can beat this around all night. I
Yeah.
think we need to get some concepts we need to include what Linda just said and possibly pass it on to
So do we
someone
need to
more
make a motion
expert
to,
than us.
to,
No,
No, okay.
No.
this is just an update,
alright,
something that maybe Public Works will have to put on the next agenda. Right?
I think Public Works should probably delve into this, right?
Yeah. Kevin?
Something that might be helpful, just in terms of a place marker for the village and public works, is whether there is an intent to create some sort of a marked lighted crossing. We've talked about those in various places, whether there might be grants available, who would pay for that sort of a thing, or whether it's just a matter of having painted lines on the street, if that's, the intent. But having that sort of just an indication in terms of what the village wants in terms of safety, so that we can incorporate that into our plans, so that it doesn't end up going to Strand and just go back to, our architect and engineer, just to coordinate that piece of it. Because this is something that the ad hoc committee wanted. Safety is something that we're all concerned about, and that I think we can work together.
Yeah, and I think if you reach out to your engineers and we reach out to Strand and DOT, we should be able to get some information in regards to grants.
Yeah, but that's way down the road. We
Yeah.
need to start with a
Exactly.
plan.
Just what you want.
Start with the plan.
to me, it sounds like we need to decide how you're gonna cross the road.
I
And
think
then
the
just
DOT
extend the
will
sidewalk.
probably decide.
No, I don't.
If we want it to be, if we want to have a permitted
It would be-
crosswalk, the DOT will determine whether to issue the permit or not. That's what they'll decide. Where we put sidewalks, they may be involved in, but that won't necessarily be what they're telling us we can or can't do.
So what, is there further action that we need to take?
Can't.
Or
No.
just an update? All right.
Is there any more discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, item 12, the President's Report. Discussion consideration. I'd like to make a recommendation on appointment of Beth Layup to the Library Board to replace Bob Burgum. She's recommended by Linda and the Library Board. There was two, but she was the choice that they really would like to see serve on their board. She's secretary of the Monroe Library, is that, which one, I can't remember.
No, she's in the Green County.
Green County Library, yeah.
Do we need a motion?
Then we need a motion.
I would make a motion to accept Beth Blaylock, the library board.
Second?
More discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. So you can let Beth know, Linda, and then tell Bob he can enjoy retirement.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more business? Hearing none, we are adjourned.